Hello, good afternoon. Please accept my apologies for the delay. We had a little bit of a technical issue. So welcome to our third series in the webinar of inclusive sports. And today we should have with us Jess Cook from Activity Alliance, who will be presenting about Activity Alliance and disability in sports. And we also have a session with Chris, who will also be conducting a Q&A with Jess. So I will pass now over to Jess, who will be presenting on Activity Alliance and disability in sports. Over to you, Jess.
Hi, can everyone hear me? I'm hoping that you can. Okay, so welcome to the inclusive boards for disabled members. I'm not entirely sure how this is going to work because I don't have control over the system. So I'm assuming that if I just say yes, somebody will move the screens over for me. So welcome to this. As said, I'm Jess Cook. If you can move the slide for me. Thank you. I currently I work for the Activity Alliance. I currently and previously have been board members. I've previously been board member for County Sports Partnerships and Charities, as well as currently board members for national governing bodies, as well as a disability sports charity. As I've said, I'm the National Partnership Advisor for the Activity Alliance, which I will kind of fill you in about that in a minute. And oh, by the way, I happen to be disabled and I'm female. So I do cut across a couple of the equality bands that we're looking at. If you can move the slide again, thank you. Activity Alliance, so just to let you know a little bit about who we are and what we do. We're the equality body funded by Sport England to work with organisations such as County Sports Partnerships, national governing bodies, and external organisations to help make them more inclusive. The purpose within the organisation is to make active lives possible by enabling organisations to support individuals with disability to be active and stay active for life. Next slide, please. The Activity Alliance has a few functions that we do. We are funded to support with research and insight, which a lot of this information I'm going to give you today comes from, as well as inclusive communication. We have an engagement team of which I'm part of nationally. Then there's 5 engagement advisors that sit locally that can support you with this movement moving forward. We also have an events team that put on events throughout the country, and the inclusive activity programme, which looks at training for organisations within disability, as well as the Get Out, Get Active programme, the GOGA programme. Next slide, please. So what do we know? We know that 1 in 5 people in England have an impairment. That's around 1.5 million. So the numbers are quite high. That also cut across is disabled people as well as those with a long-term health condition as well. So anything that's standing and has been present for longer than 12 months. We also know that psychological barriers are the biggest barrier within preventing disabled people taking part in sport, but that will also be the case for people being board members as well, because it's their perceptions and their previous experiences what will prevent them from applying and from being board members. And we also know that 3 in 5 disabled people state that either having a lack of opportunities or knowing what's available to them. Again, this will cut across board positions as well, so not all people know that they can and have the opportunity to be a board member as a disabled person. So hopefully with the information I'm going to give you today, that will kind of overlook some of that information. Okay, so mechanisms for an inclusive approach. As an organisation, we advocate to have disabled people on your board to fulfil a role, but it's not just about that they qualify as having a disability or a long-term health condition. This isn't going to support long-term commitment as a board member, and they will not feel valued if that's the reason that they're on the board, just because of their disability. Disabled people do hold professional roles. We know that around 43% of disabled adults are of working age in the UK are employed. That works out about 30% full-time, 14% part-time. And then we also know that another 7% are self-employed, and that's compared to about 10% of non-disabled people. We also know that currently 47% of disabled people are volunteering compared to 34% of non-disabled people. But to add to this, we know that disabled people are more likely to want to volunteer currently and in the future compared to non-disabled people. So there's many groups and groups of people out there that you can attract onto your boards that have the time and the willingness to want to get involved. As I'm sure you already know, it's important to use monitoring practices for both your board and your staff. Monitoring is also the best way to determine the success or otherwise of policies and practices adopted for the purpose of maintaining or promoting equality, and in this case, inclusion of disabled people throughout your whole organisation. By using monitoring practices annually, it also enables board and staff to share sensitive information, such as stuff that might have only recently occurred through injury or illness. And it's important for board members and staff to understand why you're asking for this information, so that there's no fear that there might be some repercussions from them declaring this information about themselves in the future. We have heard of companies that have used the opportunity to make people redundant because of certain things that come up through this process. But it's important that staff don't feel that that's going to happen to them, and board members as well. By evaluating the impact of your work at a board level through the annual reviews and appraisals also helps board members to remember and think about inclusivity, about their organisation and how inclusive they are in their work and towards their colleagues. We have examples of board members who have visual impairments. This has meant that the board communication during meeting changes to support this board member's needs. Each person wishing to speak told their name beforehand, and only one conversation was had at a time, and presentation information was sent out before the meeting so that this could be read through a screen reader by the individual. It's also important to think about access requirement of a board member and the venue that you'll use, as well as accessibility. You need to think about hearing loops, appropriate toilets, and any support that they might need during a board meeting. But disabled people and those with a long-term health condition will be open to that if you're asking the right questions. Board ambassadors with a responsibility for disability inclusion are a great idea, but they don't always have to be somebody with a disability. You may find that there's an ambassador that's already a current board member who has an interest or a personal connection to disability or long-term health conditions, or it may just be somebody that has works in that area currently in their role outside of the board. The Activity Alliance has a product called LEAD, which is Leading Equitable and Accessible Delivery. It was created to help organisations to be more inclusive across all areas of their business, from board right down to your everyday work. It focuses on disability. It's an organisational improvement and best shaping best practice for you. It's a journey of improvement in all areas, as well as a self-assessment and change tool for organisations to identify areas of development and improve on. This can show you how potential board members, how inclusive you are if you've done that. Moving on. So ensuring meaningful participation. When advertising a board role, it's important that you show there's a clear induction process to help new members understand your business fully, and also the role of a board member. They also need to know that there's access to training even, which can help with their own development as well as bringing something to the board. Having an ongoing review process can help things can be done through the chair, which really is important for board members and enables discussion around issues and problems that have occurred within meetings. This is really helpful for disabled people when they know that there's a one-to-one session that they can have these discussions and know that there's going to be resolves any problems that might have had. Most of them can be simply sorted out as well. The use of a buddy system within your board is a fantastic way to support new members within your first few meetings. Choosing someone who has only served on the board for maybe a year or two can help new members understand the progress and that they are making and be more confident and comfortable. The use of terminology can probably, the use of terminology that we use every day can be really helpful to sell a board position. It may be a position for a disabled person or those with a long-term health condition can attend every meeting. With technology, we need to think about this specifically. It's probably technology that you're using every day. And if it means that somebody with a disability or long-term health condition can't always attend a meeting face-to-face, the use of, due to transport issues, their supporter, maybe they need support with travelling needs to come in. There also could be that particular day their illness just isn't very good, so travelling isn't an option. If there is use of technology that you're using within a conference facility, i.e. Skype or any other video conferencing facilities that you may have, this can make a world of difference. It can also support other board members in attending more meetings as well, thus increasing board attendance all round and saving money on expenses. So maybe it could be a win-win for everyone. Next slide, please. Okay, so how to make it happen? Recruiting through an open and equitable process is important for everyone, but especially for a disabled person who may have had knockbacks from interviews in the past. And the applicant needs to be assured that their application isn't being rejected because of their disability or health condition. So feedback needs to be well thought out. Also, when recruiting, it's not just about using the usual suspects, so going to the normal places you always go to or speaking to the normal people you always talk to. It's important to get your advert out as far and wide as possible. There's a variety of sources and networks that you have available to you through advertising in press and magazines that are aimed at disabled people, social media, but advertising in an inclusive manner, which I will take you through in a moment, and also developing relationships with disability and third sector organisations local to you or national organisations that advertise roles such as us, the Activity Alliance and Disability Rights UK. The advert that you use should be clear about what the role entails and the expectations of you as an organisation from your board, and also the use of terminology can be an option when within access needs. Technology, sorry, can be an option within access needs. This also helps managing expectations through clear, transparent communication processes. Okay, next slide, please. As I said, I'm now going to take you through some helpful hints and tips that might support you. If you can remove the top tips, if that's possible. As I said, I'm now going to take you through some top tips around inclusive communication. And I'm going to start with social media. It undeniably has huge reach. There's a power to connect with most audiences, but it's important to remember not all. To reach disabled people, it's vital that we make sure our communication on social media channels are accessible and inclusive. And if you can put the top tips up. So these would be understand the different social media platforms that are available to you, taking advantage of social media advertising, use social media platforms' accessible settings and best practice tips, which all social media platforms have, and to create a content for sharing this social media. Now, to understand how to do this, you can download this fact sheet from the Activity Alliance website, and it gives you all the information around these areas. Next slide, please. Okay, so language. Language can act as a barrier to a disabled person linking in with your organisation massively. Positive language and terminology should always be used to help attract more disabled people. The top tips around this. Use positive, not negative language. Remember key words to use and avoid. Create an inclusive communication policy, which I would hope a lot of you do have, and if not, that's one thing that needs to be done for you. And use plain English. Don't use jargon. We know that the reading age within Great Britain is around 7, so using really complicated language to explain something isn't going to help to advertise to anybody, let alone somebody with a disability. Next slide, please. So campaigns. Running a campaign to recruit more board members can be a really positive thing, but planning a more accessible and inclusive campaign can attract disabled people to your organisation as well. The top tips for this. Plan carefully and factor in accessible design as soon as possible. This can be expensive otherwise. Understand your audience and communication barriers. Factor in alternative formats for delivery of the campaign. Use suppliers who understand and appreciate design and distribution. You'd be surprised how many suppliers do not, they say they can do it, but they can't. So you really need to check that when you're going through them. Next slide, please. So the information that I have just gone through with you comes from a suite of fact sheets that we've recently released to help with inclusive communication, which thus can help you to attract more disabled people to your organisation. Social media language and campaigns are 3 of 10 that we've produced. The others include promoting your events, digital communication, accessible communication on a budget, accessible design, photography, writing news stories, and finally an inclusive communications fact sheet. They are all free to download from our website, which is activityalliance.org.uk/resources. Next slide, please. Thank you. We also have a more in-depth written resource that's a kind of a how-to guide essentially for making all your communications accessible across your organisation, as well as a short video that you can watch if you are limited on time. Next slide, please. As I've said before, you can advertise on many different websites, but one place to advertise for new board members is on our website. You can do this yourselves by going on to Get Involved and Jobs and Sport. You can submit the job straight by clicking on the Submit a Job here, and it goes straight up. You've got complete control. You know exactly the information you're putting on what you want on that website. Next slide, please. And finally, for me in this section, the government have a disability confident employment scheme. It supports employers to make the most of talents disabled people can bring to your workplace and your board through changing attitudes towards disability within your organisation. It also increases your understanding of disability. It shows you are removing barriers to disabled people and those with a long-term health condition within your organisation and on your board. And it ensures that disabled people have the opportunity to fulfil their potential and realise their aspirations. By you going through this scheme and advertising this mark, you will show any potential disabled person or those with a long-term health condition that your organisation and board is the one for them. Next slide, please. Thank you. So that's my details. If you need anything from me, please get in contact if anything crops up or you think of anything after today. Next slide, please. I'm now going to introduce our case study, who I think is in control of the whole of this webinar at the moment, so it's really interesting. Next slide, please.
Not my fault, Jess.
It's all good, it's all good. So I'm now going to introduce Chris Whitaker. Chris was born and grew up in Cheshire, arriving in the world, as he puts it, in 1983 with cerebral palsy after a complex birth. He studied at Warwick University before completing a master's at Cambridge and a PhD in criminology at the University of Sheffield, at which point I should imagine you're going, oh my gosh. After university, he became a sports agent for a number of athletes in the run-up to and following 2012. And from there, he then moved into employment within the charity sector. This is where he first became a charity trustee. He served on a few boards now over the years, and currently is a trustee of 3 positions, previously having held positions at 4 other organisations, which he will go through in a minute. He currently lives in Cambridge with his wife. Some of you on the webinar that kind of kiss and boo at that, but I will let him figure that out later. So, Chris, hello.
Good afternoon, Jess. How are you? You all right?
Yes, all good, thank you. So we're going to launch straight into all the questions that I've got here. So can you tell us about the boards that you have and do sit on and the positions that you've held within them, please?
Yes, so there's a few. So they tend to be for local and regional organisations. So there's a couple in the charity sector, working with disabled people. So Power to Inspire, who use inclusion and sport. the Stay Up Late, who basically use music as a social tool to give people with intellectual impairments a social life. And I'm also currently on the board for Active Sussex, the CSP.
Perfect. And kind of, was there any particular roles that you held when you were on those boards?
I tend to gravitate to the geeky stuff, which would be no surprise given my introduction. So the stuff does tend to be equalities focused, but I'm also particularly interested in good governance and audit as well, because I really do have no life, as my wife will attest to.
Perfect. So what was it that attracted you to any of the board positions and roles that you've seen in the past and the current ones that you sit on? Why did you do it?
I think there are two main reasons. The first is an altruistic element. So being on a board is a great way to make a positive difference to an organisation by giving impact at a high level to help inform an organisation's continuous strategic development. But also secondly, in terms of a more sort of self-centred reason, it's great for professional development and development of my confidence. My confidence has come a long way since joining boards and having an increased technical appreciation for topics like governance and audit. So, what's not to like, really?
So would you kind of say that they were mainly your motivations before joining a board because of kind of your self-development as a person?
I think as for any board, impairment or not, I think it has to be a good fit. So because it's something that you do on a voluntary basis, that you can get papers at weekends. So I think having that connection and that motivation to make a positive difference using the cause is important. The ability to add value using your own sort of professional background and personal experiences. But yeah, there is also that element of personal development as well. So those three things really would be foremost in my mind, thinking about whether I wanted to join a board or not.
Perfect. So has anything put you off in the past, like from joining a board or before you kind of moved over into the charity sector? Is it something that you've kind of gone, is this for me, is this not for me?
I think the technicalities behind sort of governance and terminology like standing orders, articles of association, all those sort of technical governance terms that actually sound can quite sound intimidating, that if you're not familiar with the technical usage of them and how to come up how they come up at a meeting, that can be quite off-putting. But that's when the support from more experienced head on a board or somebody that's been on the same journey that you're embarking on is really useful to kind of take away those barriers and help to provide reassurance about the value that I could add on a board.
Perfect. Okay, so thinking about kind of now when you've been on the boards, how easy have you found it being a board member and also having a disability?
Yeah, I think the thing that stands out is technology. I'm lucky in that when I was joining boards, we were able to have quite an upfront discussion about any additional requirements that I might need to have because of my impairment. Technology is a huge factor, and so the ability to be able to Skype into meetings as opposed to having to drive down to meetings often late at night after a day at work, that's a huge thing. And I think the practical steps can be taken. Technology is a great leveler in terms of when board papers are sent round in advance and you can comment, and there's more than one way to feed in your input, as opposed to merely needing to be physically present at the meeting, although of course that's part of it. And in terms of the meeting themselves, the sensitivity in terms of chairing a meeting so that everybody, not just me, has got time and space to give their input is a really significant part of the equation, I think.
Brilliant. Okay. How have you found other board members have reacted to having you on the board or any of the boards?
With dread, probably. I found that, in all seriousness, I found that actually I've developed really good, strong working relationships, and that the combination of professional experience from sort of 10 years working in and around the third sector, combined with the lived experience that I am able to offer, has been really useful in terms of encouraging boards to achieve that. Sorry?
We're losing you there a bit, sorry.
Okay. I was, in terms of being on the board, I think I've been able to develop good professional relationships using both my professional experience, having been in the disability world for about 10 years, but also combining that with my personal experience and being an expert by experience in terms of living with my impairment for 35 years. So doing things together has really helped to develop my relationships with people on the board and to contribute holistic decision making as well.
That's my front door. I do apologise for that. So moving on to the next set of questions. Have you had any access challenges? You've mentioned around looking at equipment, paperwork, equipment that you might have, so kind of looking at your the ability to use Skype and things like that. But has there been anything that's come up around access for buildings and paperwork and things?
Access to building occasionally, parking and access to buildings can be a challenge, but I think that's where having a clear plan comes in terms of encouraging people to think about, you know, opportunities and solutions. So my attitude is that for every challenge there is actually a solution behind it. So providing that that's thought about and considered with enough forethought and enough planning, that's not an issue. Where it tends to be an issue more is where something crops up last minute. But again, through experience and through having time on board, people get to know what people's needs are in general, not just me. So it's something that becomes easier to negotiate with the passage of time.
Brilliant. And I think that's the thing, you kind of, as a board, you start to gel a bit closer together and understand what each other you need, really. So that's a really good point you brought up there. What are the biggest skills you think you bring to the board? So you kind of mentioned about the fact that you have lived experience, but would you necessarily say that you have one particular impairment? Would that necessarily enable you to show people and be the representative for other people with a disability? So thinking around that, what other skills do you feel that you bring?
I think the technical background is really important, because I have spent a long time avoiding the real world at university and been, you know, had a good standard of education. That gives me the ability to analyse things, you know, in quite a lot of detail. Some would say painstaking detail, but you know, you add the disability into the mix. And that's another string to my bow in terms of the repertoire. I think also it's more of a general thing. I think in terms of an impairment, it's important to be responsible and say, actually, just because I have an impairment doesn't mean I necessarily speak for everybody with an impairment, because everybody's experience is different. But we might need to think about X and Y and Z when we're considering doing something either practically or strategically, or channels like in the resources you referenced at the beginning, to make sure that we're being fully inclusive in our practices as an organisation.
Brilliant. Okay. And finally, have you discussed any succession planning with the chair or the CEO of the organisations that you previously were on or are on? Because you're holding a role, you're also possibly quite conscious of the fact that you are a disabled person within that board. And that when your tender time comes up, that it's time for them to look for somebody else with either similar skills or to make sure that they're not losing that area of expertise. What discussions have you had, and how are you looking at that with your current positions?
Yeah, I think good succession plans start from day one, really. Or certainly after the induction. The sooner that starts, I've been involved in a couple of boards that I'm on at the moment in talking about succession planning, developing a disability talent pool. so that we do make we do have access to channels and communication networks and mechanisms that people who have an impairment will be able to use, but also so I can kind of be constantly reaching out to people and having a touch point in terms of having those ongoing discussions and being accessible to people who have an impairment who might want to be involved. And I think that's really key in general, particularly with an impairment, because as somebody with an impairment myself, I can be a bit of a gatekeeper to communities or areas of society which can be harder to reach for somebody without that either personal or professional experience.
Definitely, and I've certainly found that within my role, having a national role that works with national governing bodies and charities and organisations, some of which are funded through Sport England. I tend to be the go-to person because I happen to hold that role, I happen to have that strategic outlet, but also I have a disability. So yeah, I can definitely relate to that one.
I think as well, Jess, just quickly, that's part of the skill. So my ability to be successful as a board member is judged on the fact that actually this is everybody's responsibility. And if I've just done my job well as a board member, it will be on everybody's radar to a degree. So it actually then becomes a seamless part of the organisational fabric and practices of the organisation through mechanisms like audit. So it won't just be me that raises the issue, it will be everybody.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Chris, for joining us today. Thank you everyone for the very slick webinar that we've just run here. I hope you've got enough information, and I'm looking forward to the questions that might come through for me. Thank you.
So before we round off, just wanted to give everyone the opportunity to ask some questions. So we've still got Chris and Jess with us for a couple of minutes. So if you have any questions, please do feel free to type them in and we'll read them out, and Chris and Jess, or both, will be happy to answer them. So if you have any questions, I'm just going to give you about a minute to type them in now. So we do have one question. So the question is from David Bentley, who asks, can you expand or clarify the meaning of accessible design? Jess, would you like to take that one?
Yeah, so accessible design comes down to the fact that whatever you're marketing or putting out for communication, you need to think about what sits behind it. So you're looking around, making sure that any Word documents have all the accessibility requirements switched on, that your website is at a certain standard when it comes to disabled people being able to access through different mediums that they might use through readers or through easy read processes. It also comes down to looking at alt tagging images, which if you've got a photograph and somebody with a reader tries to read the image and there isn't an alt tag behind it, the reader, the computer program, won't know what that image is. So then sometimes the person with the visual impairment on the other end of the reader doesn't necessarily know what that picture is trying to put across to you. So by putting an alt tag in there, just to explain somebody playing netball, for instance, will give the reader of using the equipment a much broader explanation of what's happening. We've got so many resources on this, and it would take me 3 hours to explain to you all what accessible design means, but it's essentially making sure that disabled people who use particular requirements, whether they are visually impaired or hearing impaired or have a learning disability, can use equipment to be able to access the mediums of what you're putting out there.
Thank you, Jess. We have another question from David Sherratt, who asks, are there any specific outlets which work best for recruitment?
Outlets, disabled, I quite often get asked, where do disabled people live? Do you have a postcode for them? Is there a particular street? The answer is no. Disabled people are across the whole of the community. As I've said before, there are 11.5 million disabled people in the UK, and that works out about 1 in 5 within families. You're kind of then looking at all of the different resources and mediums that a person might look at to get information. They'll go to their local paper, they'll be connected in with maybe charities and organisations. So it's really important that you know what's around you. So every single county and local authority to a certain extent have got disability organisations and charities. Disabled people will be connecting in with them. It's also really important if you're looking at somebody through maybe health, if that's the area that you're working within as opposed to just sport, advertise through the doctor's surgeries and things like that. There are ways of getting information out to people. I can't just necessarily say to you, oh, it's fine, go and advertise on Disability Rights UK website and you will get all the disabled people in the country looking at that, because it doesn't happen. It's the same as some people shop at Tesco, some people shop at Asda. It doesn't matter. Everybody goes into different angles to be able to get this work. But as long as you're making sure that you're addressing nationally the big organisations to start advertising the positions that you're holding, as well as knowing what's in your local area, you're doing a good start to get to disabled people within your local community.
Thank you, Jess. Just wanted to put it out there, if we have any final questions, we'll be happy to take them. If not, I'd like to say thank you to Jess for your presentation and for taking the time to be with us today. And thank you to Chris as well for sharing his story with us.
Thank you.
We will be sharing the recording of this webinar with you as well. And if you have any further questions outside of this, please do feel free to contact us at Inclusive Boards. Thank you and have a lovely day.